So I want to welcome everyone to Iowa City Noon Rotary. It's great to see everyone today. My name is Eric Weiler. I'm your president this year. We like to start each meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we ask everyone to take a second and unmute yourself. And we're going to put a slide up of the American flag. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now over to Zoom tips with our good friend Devin.
Thanks, President Eric. I'll keep it short. Check out your view. You can change between gallery view to see all the smiling faces of your fellow Rotarians, or check out our speaker in more detail. If you're on a computer, you should have a little slider to slide if you want to see more of John or more of his slides, depending on what he's talking about and how complicated his slides are. Check out the chat, sign in so that we can get you in for attendance, and you can talk to other people there. And then finally, the reactions tab, you can raise your hands if you have guests or visitors or questions along the way, or use your little emojis. My frequently used, imagine that, a saxophone. But yes, use those emojis, use those reactions to help add a little extra life to the presentation. Since we're Zoom and not real life, those kinds of things can add just a little bit. So back to you, President Eric.
Great, thank you, Devin. One of our goals this year is every member bring one. We know with a wider membership base, we can make more of a positive impact on our community and around the world. So if you are a visiting Rotarian, or if you're a Rotarian with a guest, please click raised hand and we'll call on you to introduce your guest. And I see Steve Schomburg.
Good morning. Yeah, it's my pleasure to welcome Bill Furlong once again as a guest, and he is also in the process of becoming a member. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much, Steve. I look forward to becoming a full-fledged member.
Very welcome, Bill. Any other guests today or visiting Rotarians? So on to our Rotary announcements. As we know, this was a big week, not just in our community, but around the country with the elections. And I want to congratulate our Rotarian and our friend, Mayor Bruce Teague, for being reelected and also getting the most votes in the council election. And Mayor Teague, I want to invite you just to unmute yourself and say a few words if you could.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. I'm super excited to have the opportunity to serve our community one more time. And I'm full of gratitude. The one thing I would say about Iowa City is there is opportunity. If people want to live and grow together, I think we can continue to work together. And I'm so grateful again for being able to be in this role one more time and serve our community. So thanks to everybody, and looking forward to working with all of our elected officials that have been elected throughout our county.
Great, thank you, Mayor Teague. And also, while we're on the line of congratulating folks, last night the Corridor Business Journal had their Women of Influence event, and two of our Rotarians were recognized. We had our past Rotary president, Barb Thomas, was recognized, and Andrea Rhodes was recognized as well. And I know Andrea is on the call. Andrea, I just want to put you on the spot. If you just want to unmute yourself and just say a few words. Oh, you're on mute still, Andrea.
Did that work?
Yes, yep.
There we go, yes. All right. Well, thank you very much. It was a beautiful evening. 10 women of influence and one emerging woman of influence was honored, and I was very pleased to be among them. But it was a lovely evening, and very inspirational to hear all of the stories. So thank you.
Yep. And Andrew, I know they had, for all the recipients, they had a surprise. They had someone close to them videotape a message. And
yes.
If I recall, yours was your daughter. That's correct?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's always it's hard enough to get up there for myself anyway and not be emotional. And then, when you start it off and it's like, well, here's a message from your daughter. Now get up there and give the speech. It's like, well, let me gather myself for a few minutes, but it was lovely. Yes.
Great. Well, yeah, special congratulations again to Andrea and to Barb. And if you have a Rotary related announcement, click raise hand and we'll call on you. I just want to remind everyone, one of my goals as club president is communications. I want to make sure everyone is aware of all the great programs that are coming down the line. And I want folks to be aware of some of the Rotary trainings and opportunities we have to roll up our sleeves and get involved in the community. And every Monday morning, I'm sending out a weekly Rotary email. So if you're not getting that email for some reason, just send me a private chat with your email so we can make sure that you're getting that great information. And also want to remind everyone that the combination of COVID in our community and the Highlander having some scheduling conflicts this fall, where they were not available for us on Thursdays to meet in person, that the Rotary Board, we've decided to be 100% on Zoom through year end, with the hopes of coming back in person in January of 2022. So we're hoping we can be back in person in January, and we're still going to have the hybrid option where you can still log in through Zoom as well. Any other Rotary related announcements at all? Usually we have a few. This must be a quiet week. We do this week, I'm excited. One of the best parts of being president is to grow our membership and induct new members. And we're going to have a new member induction today. And I'd like to introduce the sponsor of our new member. Our new member, her name is Missy Forbes, and Rotarian Ryan Bell is her sponsor. So Ryan, would you like to just tell us a little bit about Missy real quick?
I would, yes. I think I could have been one of about all of our members to sponsor Missy because she comes to us so highly regarded in the community. And I'm going to read her bio for you just so you all can get to know her a little bit better before she rides the goat here in the coming weeks. Missy Forbes is the executive director of 4Cs, a nonprofit that advocates for affordable, quality childcare, as well as co-founder of the recently formed Neighborhood Nests for students during the pandemic is what that was formed for. She's an Iowa City native, a proud graduate of City High and the University of Iowa. She's got a long history of leadership in our community, starting as a chamber ambassador, serving on several nonprofit boards, and in general, she's an advocate to make Iowa City the absolute best place in Iowa to live for everyone who calls this awesome, fair city their home. She has met several world famous people, including, we've already discussed her meeting with Rick Springfield. I didn't know about this one. This one ups it, I think. Tom Cruise, anybody? I mean, come on. And Huey Lewis plus the News. So she met Huey and his band, the News. And she is, I can attest to this. I haven't been on Facebook for a while, but the last thing I remember from Facebook is that she found some fame starting as the lead singer of the Family Band, which she performs with her children. It's hilarious. You got to tune in. But above all, welcome to the club, Missy. We'll have lots of fun together. Glad to have you here beside all of us.
Great. Ryan, thank you so much for bringing Missy to the club. Missy, I made a note here if we need some musical entertainment sometime. We've got Missy Forbes and the Family Band in the future, so we might call on you for that. So Missy, you have been approved for membership in this club because we believe you to be a worthy representative of your vocation, interested in the ideals of Rotary, and willing to do your share in translating those ideals into actions. Rotary is non-political, non-discriminatory, and non-denominational. Our impact starts with our members, people who work tirelessly with their clubs to solve some of the most difficult challenges in our communities. Our efforts are supported by Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation, which turns our donations into grants that fund the work of our members and partners around the globe. When you become a member of the Iowa City Noon Rotary Club, you will join over 1.2 million Rotarians around the world. Rotary International uses the term JET to describe what we do so well: join leaders, exchange ideas, and take action. Your challenge as a new Rotarian is to get involved, join at least one committee, and bring guests and introduce them to Rotary. Now, Missy, if we were in person, we would be giving you a standing ovation, but obviously unable to do that. but I want to invite our members to provide a virtual round of applause for our newest member and friend, Missy Forbes. So please help me welcome and recognize Missy. And welcome, Missy. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be a part of the Noon Rotary. Just being from Iowa City, I am working in nonprofits in the human services industry, and I know well how impactful this group is, not only internationally, but also locally as well. So I am proud to be a new member of the group, and I appreciate again my sponsor, Ryan, and all of my other friends that are in Rotary that have been so welcoming, and all of the people that have just said hello and welcomed me every week that I've been coming along. So looking forward to getting more involved. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, congratulations, Missy. We're excited to have you as a member, and we'll reach out and schedule a time probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks for you to ride the go, where you'll get 3 minutes to tell your story to us. So we look forward to that later this fall.
I think I'm going to bring the band with me.
The band, yes. So now we're ahead of schedule. We're on to our program, and I'd like to introduce Andrea Rhodes to introduce our speaker to us today. Andrea.
Great. It is with great pleasure that I introduce my boss. John Lohman is the CEO, publisher, and co-owner of the Corridor Media Group, Inc., which is he founded with his wife, Aspen, in 2004. The company publishes the Corridor Business Journal, and we're focused on providing local business news and information to business and community leaders in the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City corridor. And as you will learn, John is currently in the process of launching the Quad Cities Regional Business Journal in January. Mr. Lohman was formerly employed as the communications manager for the Duane Arnold Energy Center, Iowa's only nuclear power plant, and marketing manager for Gazette Communications, where he helped launch the Iowa City Gazette edition of the Cedar Rapids Gazette newspaper. He was also an adjunct professor at Kirkwood Community College and has worked in a variety of fields, including politics, public relations, and journalism. John holds a degree in communication studies and master's degree in journalism from the University of Iowa. John received the 2008 Iowa Small Business Person of the Year Award from the U.S. Small Business Administration and the 2008 Neil Smith Entrepreneur of the Year Award for the state of Iowa from the Iowa Small Business Development Centers. John has served on and continues to serve on many civic, charitable, and nonprofit boards, committees, and task force. He currently serves on the University of Iowa Small Business Development Center Advisory Board. He is a board president of the Alliance of Area Business Journals, which is a national trade organization for independently owned business journals. He is founding board member with the 100+ Men Who Care Hawkeye chapter that has given more than $600,000 to local charities in Johnson County since 2014. And he is also the past chair of the Regional Branding Initiative, which developed the Iowa Creative Corridor brand. Additionally, John is a member of the Downtown Rotary Club of Cedar Rapids, and he is also a Paul Harris Fellow. In his spare time, he loves spending time with his family, traveling, hiking, and running, and he just completed the last 10 Chicago marathons. He lives in North Liberty with his wife Aspen, his son Quincy, and his daughter Lucy. So John, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for that nice introduction. And thank you, fellow Rotarians, for inviting me to speak to this club. I've had the opportunity to speak to you a couple times over the last several years. And so I'm excited about being back and telling you a little bit about some of the things that are happening at the CBJ. I would also, I did want to mention and congratulate Andrea and Barb for their Women of Influence recognition last night. They had great speeches. It was a really special evening, as Andrea said. I also want to congratulate Devin for being one of our 40 under 40 honorees earlier this year. And so it's nice to be having events back in person after a couple of years of not having that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself briefly, but I do know a lot of you on the call today. And as Andrea said, I am a member of the Downtown Cedar Rapids Rotary Club. I've been a member of that since 2006, I believe. I was on the board for a while. And also, my involvement with Rotary goes way back. My little brother was an international Rotary scholar probably 30 years ago, and he went to Brazil. And so I've got a strong affection for Rotarians and the role that we play in the world. And so thank you again for being here with me. You're giving me the opportunity. I'm going to show you, I'm going to share my screen so you don't have to see my face this whole time. We'll do this real quick, and then I'll dive right into the presentation. So hopefully you can see that. So Barb thought I should talk a little bit about the evolution of a small family-owned media company. And this slide shows you a little bit about that, but let me start by talking a little bit about myself so you know who I am. I was born in Evanston, moved to Iowa when I was 2 weeks old, and basically lived almost my entire life in the state. I grew up in a booming metropolis in northwest Iowa called Alta, Iowa. It's a town of about 1,800 people. I grew up, graduated from there. Actually, I grew up on Main Street, literally on Main Street, a couple blocks from the high school, a couple blocks from the elementary school. There were no street lights in the town when I grew up there. I moved to Iowa City to go to the University of Iowa and follow in my older brother's footsteps. And I have to tell you that when I came to Iowa City, I went through a little bit of culture shock, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, Iowa City is not like Alta, but I really grew to love Iowa City, everything about Iowa City, the diversity and the people from all around the world. And so I grew to love the university and Iowa City. A couple notable things about my time at the University of Iowa. I was student body president in the early 90s. I was also Herky the Hawk at the University of Iowa. And when I talk about those two things, you know, I'm pretty proud of, you know, having been student body president in front of for more than 30,000 students. But, you know, being Herky completely overshadows that, and everybody's excited, much more excited about me being Herky than anything else. And so I was also in the Delta Tau Delta fraternity. And the reason I brought that up, two reasons. One is because Herky the Hawk, the Dell House used to be in charge of Herky back in the day. It's no longer the case. And I did meet my wife at a toga party at the Dell House way back in the day. And so I bleed black and gold, and the University of Iowa has always been a big part of my life. So there's my family, my daughter, hopefully you can see that. There's my daughter, Lucy, on the left. She's a sophomore at Liberty High School. My wife, Aspen, who's co-owner of the business. She is a first grade teacher in Coralville at Coralville Central. She's been doing that for 25 years. And then there's my son, John Quincy, who's a freshman at the University of Iowa. And I'm really envious of his hair, as you can imagine. And then there's our brand new dog, Scout. I've never had a dog before. Somehow they broke me during COVID to get a dog. And so actually the dog comes into the office almost every day. And so most of the staff likes that. So that's a little bit about me personally. We do live in North Liberty. I joke that we're one of the founders of North Liberty because when we moved to North Liberty, I think in 98 or 99, there were less than 4,000 people in the community, and now there's over 4,000. So I joke we're one of the founders. As Andrea said, I do like to run. So that's a picture of me finishing the Chicago Marathon last month. And then as Andrea also said, I like to hike and travel around the world. And that's a picture of me at Machu Picchu a few years back. So that's a little bit about me. Let's talk a little bit about the Corridor Business Journal for those of you who aren't familiar with the publication and the background. And so if you look in the upper left-hand corner there, you see a picture of us in our first issue. And if you look really closely, you'll see two special things. You'll see a hair on my head, and then you'll see your fellow Rotarian, John Kenyon, who's there in the red. And so John Kenyon was our founding editor, and he really helped us get the business off the ground. He brought such expertise, having come over from the Cedar Rapids Gazette. And so he's a big part of our success over the years. The other photo on the upper right is Aspen and I cutting office space for the new location on the Iowa River Landing. We moved in there in May of 08, and we moved out in June of 08 because we got flooded probably about 30 days after that photo was taken. So that wasn't a lot of fun. And then the photo down at the bottom is of my family when we broke ground on the CBJ World Headquarters. I think that was 2015. And so there's a couple fun photos for you. So let me just tell you a little bit about, I'm gonna jump out of here. And so you can see my face again. There we go. So the story goes about the Corridor Business Journal, for those of you who haven't heard it. After I got my master's degree at the University of Iowa, my first real job out of college was I was hired as the communications manager, or I was hired as the marketing manager for the Cedar Rapids Gazette. They hired me to help launch the Iowa City Gazette edition of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. And it was my first real job out of graduate school. And things were going pretty well, I thought, until one day, about 2 years into the job, I get a call from my boss, and he says, John, I need to see you today in the conference room at 4 o'clock. And I said, well, I've got a meeting today at 4 o'clock. He goes, cancel it. I need to see you in the conference room today at 4 o'clock. And I said, okay. So I went in there, and he said, today is your last day at the business. And I was a little kind of confused and shocked at the same time. I'd never been fired before. I've never even known anybody that had been fired before. That's how kind of young and naive I was. And so I went through this kind of period of self-loathing after that for probably 3 or 4 or 5 months. And I thought to myself, how can I never get fired again, right? And Peter Drucker, the management guru, talks about a crucible moment. And that was the crucible moment in my life where I thought, I don't ever want to get fired again, so I really need to start my own business. Well, you might be thinking ahead and thinking that, you know, he decided to create this business journal to compete with the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and there's some kind of poetic justice there. Well, let me kind of disabuse you of that notion, because that was not even on my mind. No clue that I thought I would start up a newspaper. So I needed to find a job until I figured out what kind of business I was going to start. So fortunately, I got a job at the Duane Arnold Energy Center, Iowa's only nuclear power plant in Palo. And this was right after 9/11. And as you recall, the interest in the plant was really heightened because people wanted to know, was it safe? Was it secure? All those types of things. And so I would take plant officials around the state of Iowa doing outreach. So we spoke to editorial boards, we spoke to elected officials, and we spoke to civic groups like Rotary clubs like this. And we kept trying to tell them that the plant's safe and secure, and it produces a clean greenhouse or clean energy. And so when we were in Des Moines, I asked somebody there, are we talking to all the right places? And somebody said, John, have you talked to the folks at the Des Moines Business Record? And I'd never heard of the Des Moines Business Record before. Some of you might be familiar with that publication. It's been around now for almost 40 years, and it does a nice job of keeping a pulse on the economic development activities in the greater Des Moines area. And I thought, why isn't there something like that in Cedar Rapids, or why isn't there something like that in Iowa City? And so it just so happened that about the same time I was taking an evening MBA class from the University of Iowa, where you had to come up with a business idea and a business plan. And so I worked on the business plan in the class. I moved on and continued to work on the business plan for about a year and a half. And then it got to the point where I either needed to do something with it or just set it on the shelf and move on. Well, I decided to do something, but the first person I needed to talk to was my wife. And my wife at this time was a half-time first grade teacher at Coralville Central. And we just had our son, Quincy. So Aspen decided to stay home half-time. And And I go to her, I go, sweetheart, I'd like to quit my very good paying job at a utility to start up our newspaper in North Liberty in our basement. And if it doesn't work out, we can always fall back on your half-time first grade teacher salary. And inexplicably, she said, let's go for it. So that was about 18 years ago. And we really had a great run. But it wasn't done without the support of amazing employees like John Kenyon to get us off the ground, and Andrea Rhodes. I hired Andrea relatively early on, and she brought a lot of discipline and financial integrity and organization to a guy who likes to do things by his gut, and sometimes that's not necessarily the best way to go. So we launched in 2004. We were profitable in 2007, and we've been mainly profitable since then, except for the great flood and recession, and of course, the great pandemic that we went through. We have grown our business from it being strictly a weekly print issue to daily email updates. I don't know if you folks get those, but you should. They're free and they're really wickedly popular. We also have many events, as we talked about a little bit earlier. We'll do 15 events. Our smallest event is our manufacturing conference, about 150 people, up to our largest, which is our economic forecast luncheon, which has between 600 and 700 people in the room on non-pandemic years. So I'll talk a little bit about, the pandemic and how that's impacted us. In 2020, the first quarter was going pretty darn well. And then the pandemic hit. And I got to tell you that in April of 2020, our revenue was off 35% from the previous year, because as you can imagine, when you do 15 events and that's part of your business strategy, and you can't have 400 or 500 people in a room, that really impacts the business model. And so we were down 35% again in April, and it looked like that, we were going to have to lay off probably at least a third of my staff, if not more, if things were going to continue the way they were. And it was probably the scariest time in my life. And, it's probably the scariest time in many of your lives as well. You work hard, you do all the things you're supposed to do, and then something comes along that's outside of your control. That is the potential of making your business go bankrupt. And so it was so scary, but I have to tell you, I'm a pretty cold-hearted capitalist, but I have to tell you that we did receive money from the federal government, the Paycheck Protection Plan, the PPP, and we received that money, and frankly, that saved us from, basically laying off a third of my staff. It enabled us to continue to operate, and I think the intent of the law, of course, was to save jobs, and that's what it did, at least at the Quarter Business Journal. And so we're very thankful for that, and I tell people whenever I can that it was a very important a program to keep us surviving and thriving. And so, one of the few good things about the pandemic, from my perspective, is I actually got to spend some time working on the business for the first time, as opposed to in the business. The first time in 17 years. And we really thought strategically, how can we do things differently? And so one of the big things we did, we launched a brand new website in May of this year. And I think it might sound a little cliche that we launched a brand new website, but I have to tell you that it's really helped us kind of transform the organization. We've been very print focused and print centric for the last 17 years. And that's really been good, but we are becoming a much more digitally savvy world, as you all know. And so we really needed to take some efforts to become a better digitally focused organization. And so we launched this brand new website in May. And I thought to myself, well, if we're putting all of our content on our website, do we have to print the CBJ every week moving forward? And the answer to that question is no. And so in January of next year, we are going to start printing every other week. And it's a big deal for us because we've been weekly ever since we launched, but we're also upgrading to this brand new print quality. Some of you might have seen it. It's a glossy print, something that we've always wanted to do, but frankly, it just costs quite a bit more. And so by going 26 times and having this website, we're actually able to spend some more money on this glossy print quality. And I think readers will have a better experience with it. And I think marketers and advertisers will like the publication glossy. And so that's going to start taking effect in January. So one of the other big things that I wanted to talk about is our movement into the Quad Cities. So I have to tell you and go back a little bit. About 3 or 4 years after we launched the Corridor Business Journal, I get a call from the mayor of Bettendorf. His name was Mike Freemeyer at the time, or that's his name, but he's no longer mayor. And he says, John, can I come over and visit with you? And I said, of course. And so he comes over and visits me and he says, John, I come to the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City market quite often, and I really like what you're doing with your publication. I really like what you're doing with your events. And I want you to launch a Quad Cities regional business journal. And I said to the mayor at the time, I go, well, I am flattered that you think we've got a really good model here, but there's just no way that I can launch a business journal in the Quad Cities at that time. And so I said, maybe down the road that might happen. So I tucked that away in the back of my mind, and I thought maybe sometime down the road that would happen. So during this pandemic, when we're trying to think more strategically, we've always wanted to kind of buy the Des Moines Business Record in Des Moines that I referenced earlier. It's owned by my mentor, Connie Weimer, who's the first woman inducted into the Iowa Business Hall of Fame. And she's 90 now. And I've tried to buy it from her a couple times, but it just hasn't worked. And so I thought, maybe this Quad Cities things might work. And it just so happened that last January, in our economic forecast luncheon, which I mentioned is one of our largest events in non-pandemic years, we had a national speaker, economist, and then we had a panel of regional business leaders. And one of the ladies that we had on the panel, her name was Jennifer Bennett. And I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to meet Jennifer yet, but she's the new CEO of Shive Hattery. And it just so happens that she, after the event, she comes up to me and she goes, John, I've only been in the market a few months. I grew up in the Quad Cities. I ran Shive Hattery's Moline office before being promoted to CEO and moving to Cedar Rapids. And I've only been in the market a couple of months, but I really like what you're doing with your publication. I really like what you're doing with your events. And oh, by the way, I think something like this could really work in the Quad Cities. So, the light bulb goes off again. And I thought, now maybe might be the time to launch this Quad City Business Journal. But the first person I really needed to get on board was Andrea Rhodes. So I wrote this business plan. I spent about 2 months on it. And then I gave it to her before spring break. And I said, Andrea, take some time, read this, let me know what you think. And she read it and she goes, John, I think this is the right approach for us. And so we have been working on launching the Quad City Business Journal since the springtime. And I've been spending about a day or two a week in the Quad Cities since this summer, trying to meet with business and community leaders to get a sense whether or not something like this would work. And probably many of you are more familiar with the Quad Cities than I am, but it's interesting how similar the corridor is to the Quad Cities. They're both about 500,000 residents if you kind of stretch it. Both have a very strong manufacturing base. Both have a couple big players in the sense that they've got John Deere, they've got the Rock Island Arsenal, we've got Rockwell Collins or Collins Aerospace, and we've also got the University of Iowa. There's lots of businesses that do business in both markets. You think about RSM McGladrey, Honkamp Kruger, lots of the financial institutions have presence in both markets. And so I started meeting with business and community leaders in that market over the last 3 or 4 or 5 months, and the response frankly has been overwhelming. I usually get 2 responses from folks when I meet with them over there. The first is, thank you for coming, and we're excited about you being here. And the second thing is they're asking how can they help? And so it's been amazing. The business plan is coming along like we anticipated. I have to tell you that we have hired 4 people so far in the market. We just signed a lease on some office space in Bettendorf just yesterday, believe it or not. But I wanted to tell you just briefly about the employees that we were able to hire so far, because it really has frankly given us probably the most experienced journalist in the entire Quad Cities at this point. We have hired Jennifer DeWitt, who was the Quad City Times business editor, and she was the business reporter for 20 years. She just came on board as our editor of the Quad City Regional Business Journal. We have Kenda Burrows. She was a opinion page writer and editor for the Moline Dispatch and the Rock Island Arsenal for many, many years. And we also have David Thompson, who is currently the night editor of the Quad City Times, and he is joining us in just a couple of weeks. And so, as you can tell, just from what I mentioned there, we've got an amazing amount of journalistic experience in the Quad Cities, and we're really excited about it. We will be launching our website on December 1st in that market, and we'll be launching our daily email updates in that market on December 1st. And we will also be, our first print edition of the Quad Cities Regional Business Journal will launch in January. As you can imagine, we joined the Chamber of Commerce in that market, and we've gotten a great response, and it's going great. And so, one of the things that I have to tell you is I think I'm an okay entrepreneur. So I really get a lot of energy for meeting new people and starting things. And I think I'm good at that. I think I'm maybe not such a great operator of a business. And so that's why I have people like Andrea, who are the real experts and have great business mind for helping me get the business off the ground and helping me get the business plan executed in the Quad Cities. So I did, before I take some questions, I did want to just have you follow along in my logic here on how things have transpired over the last 6 months or so. So the new website that we launched at the Corridor Business Journal has afforded us the opportunity to go 26 times. And so instead of being weekly, we're going to go bi-weekly. And since we're going 26 times, that affords us the opportunity to upgrade our print quality to the glossy. Also, since we're going 26 times, it's giving us the opportunity to launch this Quad Cities Business Journal, because that'll be published on alternating weeks when the CBJ is not printed. And, for most of you in the business world, you're pretty familiar with this world of scaling a business, right? How do you scale a business? And frankly, this has been a pretty elusive term for me, because owning a relatively small business journal in a relatively small market, it's tough to get any type of scale. But by going into the Quad Cities, we are starting to get that scale that we've never had before. So we currently have a staff of about 15, 16 at the Corridor Business Journal. And the Quad Cities, we're going to hire probably 5, 6, 7 folks initially, and then probably a couple more down the road. But we won't need, 15, 16 people in that market, because several of us in this market will be able to do similar roles in both markets. And so it's providing us with the opportunity to have some of that scale. haven't done any of this for money, as you can imagine. Everything I've done is just so I can never get fired again. Really, that's always has been my mission in life since I got fired at the Gazette many years ago, is just to never get fired again. And it's also kind of nice to be able to keep your wife and your banker happy. And so if I can keep those two folks happy, I think we got a really good thing going, and they're still relatively happy with me. So that's a little bit about me and my background, and I covered a lot of ground here, but things are going very well. And again, it's really primarily due to the employees that I have, Andrea, and folks like John Kenyon, and who helped us get off the ground. And Jared Lyons is on the call. I see his wife, Becky, has been with us for many years as our creative director. And so those folks are the ones that really do a great job and help us get to where we need to be. And so thank you so much for letting me say a few words about operating and growing a small family-owned media company during and through a pandemic. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
Great. Thank you so much, John. If you have a question, click raise hand and we'll call on you to ask your question. And John, I was going to ask, thinking about your journey as an entrepreneur, if you could go back in time 15 or 20 years, what advice would you give to a younger John Lohman just starting out?
Sure, that's a great question. Well, I would say a couple things. Number one, I would say write a business plan. Sometimes entrepreneurs nowadays don't want to go through that process, but I think it was probably one of the most important things that I did. It helped us get money from the bank. It helped us get great employees like John Kenyon from other existing media companies. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is make sure that your spouse or your significant other is completely all in with you on the endeavor. And fortunately, I had that with my wife, Aspen, because if you don't have him or her on board with you, it's going to be a real tough row, because there's going to be difficult times. And if you don't have him or her to support you through those times, it's going to be really challenging. And then the third thing I would just recommend is get a mentor. I referenced my mentor, Connie Weimer, she's 90. She lives part-time in Mexico, but she's been a great resource for me over these last 18 years. And if you have a good business plan, you have a supporting spouse or significant other, and you got a great mentor, that's going to help you get things going in the right direction.
Great. Kelly Drown. Kelly, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, John. Always interesting to kind of hear the whole story, and impressive indeed. Do you anticipate or foresee an opportunity to combine the markets, like for the economic forecast luncheon? Do you have any, I guess, aspirations to have a bigger event now that you're going to have two of those two markets?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kelly. Thank you for that. I would say that there's probably going to be a couple of events that we might rotate every other year from one market to the next. And so I'm thinking specifically of our manufacturing conference. So that might be one we would do every other year. But I think, again, they are different markets. And when people ask me also about the question of, how much content is going to be shared across both publications, I think there's probably going to be maybe 10% of our content will be relatable to both markets. I think everybody wants to know about the University of Iowa. Everybody wants to know what's going on with John Deere. And everybody wants to know on some of these bigger trend stories. But I think, again, mostly they are different markets, and we will probably maintain a lot of events separate than combining them into just one event. But I think we will probably do just a little bit of marketing of both events in each other publication, in case we can get some crossover from each market. So we're planning on 5 events in the Quad Cities the first year, and then continuing to scale after that.
Great. Thank you.
John Kenyon, you had a question. John, go ahead.
Yeah, John, I was wondering if we could just talk a little bit more about how amazing I am. I mean, it was nice to hear, but no, in all seriousness, I'm glad to have been able to play a part in the early days. But I actually had a question. In the book industry that I'm paying attention to now, they've talked a lot about paper and the supply chain shortages and all of those things and how that's going to affect things. And obviously with you staying in paper, albeit going to a different format, have you, I'm sure, had to think about those types of things, how that might affect what you're doing moving forward?
Well, that's a great question, John, and it's probably one of the scarier questions that we're dealing with, because we just went to a conference a couple weeks ago, and our printer, talking about the printing industry, is struggling not only to get paper, but they're also struggling to get ink. And if they can get the paper and if they can get the ink, they can't necessarily get a driver to deliver it from the mill to the printing company, and the printing company is not having enough workers to print the actual papers. And so it is a very scary proposition, particularly since we are moving to a brand new printer for the very first time. And so we think and hope that we have what we need to get the new paper off the ground in January. So I'm hopeful that things will get better at that point. The paper industry person suggested it was going to get better, hopefully by then. But, you know, the thing, again, that we need to be capable of doing, and that's one of the nice things about having a really great website now, is all of our content is on our website now. And if you're a subscriber to the CBJ or the QCBJ, you'll be able to get that content online as long as you're a paid subscriber. And so the content will be available. There won't be any less content, but it'll just be produced and published in a different format. And we're hopeful that the paper and the printing and all that will work itself out.
Any other questions for John at all? John, I want to mention that I've attended, as you know, many of the Corridor Business Journal events in the past, and you and your team, I always tell you, do a wonderful job of starting on time, ending on time. You keep the meeting flowing, great networking opportunities. You're going to meet people who are making news in our community, and you'll get to hear their inspirational stories. So keep up the great work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, Eric, if I can just thank you so much for that. And if I can just say that, you know, as we enter the Quad City market, if any of you have any connections in the business community there that we should get connected with, I would appreciate if you forwarded that to Andrea or myself. We're, you know, we joined the chamber. We're going to send the publication to a lot of the business and community leaders in that market. But if there's somebody that might be under the radar screen that we should get connected with, I would appreciate that connection. And I appreciate your time this morning, and thank you for being Rotarians, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words.
Great. Yeah, thank you again, John. And as you know, being a Rotarian, you know Rotary has a deep connection to polio and trying to eradicate polio. So in honor of our speakers every week, John, we will make a donation to the Rotary Polio Plus program in your honor. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation matches that 2-to-1. So that'll provide 70 polio vaccinations around the world in your honor. So thank you again.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep. And final reminders, we've got a great program scheduled next week. We have our friend Rotarian Shelley Mahari is going to be talking about the Community Foundation. So that'll be a meeting you won't want to miss next Thursday, same time. And we like to end every meeting with the Rotary 4-way test. We'll put that up on the screen in a second here. And if you could please unmute yourself and join me in the Rotary 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Hope everyone has a great weekend. Great to see you, and we'll see you next Thursday. So see you guys. Thanks.
Thanks.